What's up guys, Grace here with some more Anthem tips and tricks to talk about. The game is finally out for everybody, or should be by the time this video gets posted, which is why I wanted to cover some of the stuff that Anthem doesn't fully explain to players outright, or at least not until a lot of digging and experimenting with the various mechanics is being done. This also comes as a response to the huge amount of questions that I'm getting on all of my Anthem videos, so if you're a newcomer or even a more experienced player, they should all prove useful to you. Now, one of the first things you'll ever see after getting your first items, especially the higher quality ones, is the fact that they all have certain bonuses as well as icons next to them. While the bonuses are for the most part self-explanatory, the icons not so much, specifically the cog and the suit. The difference between these two is rather simple though, and it boils down to this. The suit icon will show bonuses that applies to your entire javelin and everything else you have equipped on it. Meanwhile, the cog icon indicates strictly the bonuses that applies to the item it's currently on. So to give you an example, let's take this Winter's Wrath Blast Seal, which has 3 suit bonuses as well as 1 for gear. The 3 suit bonuses, which are the heavy pistol damage, the assault rifle ammo increase, as well as the repair amount, affect the entire javelin and whatever else there is equipped on it that might benefit from these buffs. Meanwhile, the cog icon with the 75% damage increase only refers to the current blast seal, and in this case the Winter's Wrath, and this means that the Winter's Wrath will have an additional 75% damage on top of the damage it already had. So yeah, this is pretty much it, there you have it, and hopefully this explains everything you needed to know about these two icons. But these are not the only ones you might find on pieces of equipment, and some of them might even have a circle dot next to their name or a star, and sometimes neither of these. These are what we call primers and detonators, and we have the circle dot indicating that the ability is a primer, while the star icon indicates that the ability is a detonator. This is basically the combo system in a nutshell, and the short version of that is that the primers provide a debuff on the enemy, while the detonator causes those debuffs to explode in an area around the target and deal additional damage in an AoE. As for the items with none of these icons next to their name, the difference is that these don't provide any of these bonuses, but instead have an overall higher damage output in order to compensate for the lack of combos. Once you get the masterwork and legendary items though is when things become super interesting, and you might see even non-detonators having bonus effect that does let them detonate certain primers. For example, the stasis chain, which is neither a primer nor a detonator, on this rarity also comes with a bonus effect that lets it detonate electric damage, so this means you can synergize this with an electric type primer, and there's more of this in the game as well, so you kinda need to play around and experiment a lot before settling on a build. But moving on to your ultimate ability, you typically recharge this by simply using your attacks, and it does generally progress over time, but there are certain ways in which you can fasten that up really well. The current two best ways to make your ultimate ability recharge as fast as possible are by far to detonate as many enemies as possible at the same time, as well as killing as many targets at the same time as possible. Certain classes are better at doing this than others. For example, the Storm and the Colossus are probably the best right now, since they have a huge amount of AoE abilities, many of which also act as detonators. They also have a lot of primers, so it kinda makes sense. Now, as I was talking about the combo system earlier, and something the game doesn't really explain in full is the fact that each javelin has a hidden class ability that affects the way their combos work. First, we have the Storm, which has an AoE spread ability, and this pretty much does what it says. It spreads the elemental debuffs from the target it detonates to all the nearby enemies. The Colossus has an AoE explosion, which damages all nearby enemies. The Interceptor has an aura effect, which means that once he detonates a target, he gains the aura of that enemy and then goes in and spreads it to other enemies it's close to. Finally, the Ranger has a critical target damage, which causes large single target detonation damage to whatever enemy it's attacking, so just like the Interceptor, it's more suited for single target. And number 5, you most probably found by now that the shielded enemies cannot be primed, at least not until you take their shields down. Well, there are certain ways in which you can take them faster than others. The best way, of course, is by using electric damage abilities, which are by far the best against shields, but frost damage is also decently high against them, nowhere near close as electric damage, but still good. In fact, all of the 4 debuffs in the game currently have several effects. Frost slows down and even freezes the enemies, Fire applies a damage over time burn, electric damage electrifies enemies, which will shock them as well as the nearby targets, and finally acid, as you may or may not know, reduces the target's resistances to damage. At number 6, the sigils you can craft in the Expedition's Consumables tab can be stacked with one another as long as the crafting items that you made are of different rarities. For example, I was able to craft 3 heavy pistol damage sigils, one was green, one was blue, and of course course one was epic, and I was able to put each one of these in all of the 3 separate slots. What this means is that I can pretty much stack all of their bonuses, but it works with pretty much any other consumable in the game. At number 7, while fighting enemies, you might see those green ammo crystals dropping on the ground. While they do replenish your current ammo capacity, they also automatically reload your weapon. This is extremely useful for high bullet count weapons, and as long as you pick up those crystals, you don't even need to reload your weapons and pretty much shoot towards enemies for extended periods of time. This is especially useful if you're playing as a Colossus and using the autocannon. At number 8, I know many of you guys still have this question, but in Anthem, the loot rarity as well as the power level scales with your pilot's level. The higher your pilot is and the closer you are to level 30, the better the items will be. Increasing difficulty settings, like for example to Grandmaster and above, simply increases your odds of getting Masterwork and Legendary items by a certain percentage, but the biggest factor is of course having level 30. At number 9, certain classes can bypass the overheat mechanic and continue to hover almost indefinitely. The best example in this regard is of course the Storm, which can continue to hover simply by jumping in the air and charging up an ability, preferably one that requires a charge up and release, like for example the Burning Orb. As long as you don't release the button, you can stay up in the air as long as you want to, of course unless a sniper knocks you down or there's other abilities that knock you down, but overheating will not take you down by no means. This means that if you have certain components that give you bonus damage to hovering, you can continue to use this ability despite being overheated. On the same subject of flying and hovering, at number 10 there's a few things you can do in order to keep yourself in the air for much longer and to prevent overheating. First of course, the higher the angle is that you're flying, the faster your jets will overheat. Similarly, flying downwards will mean that your jets will overheat much slower, to the point that dive bombing even cools down your jets by quite a bit. Second of all, rainy weather as well as flying over water surfaces will cool off your jets, applying a cool effect on them, which you can see by the blue coloring of your heat bar. Finally, also running through waterfalls and even momentarily submerging underwater completely cools off your jets and even removes all overheat. So if you're overheating and descending really quickly, you can aim towards a nearby waterfall and then you won't be forced to wait until the cooldown is done. Coming up at number 11, while Anthem is an always online video game, this doesn't mean you can't do activities on your own. This is especially true for the main story, which you can do completely solo without even using the matchmaking system by simply changing your expedition settings from public to private before going into your next mission. I also recommend doing this in order to take things slower, and especially if you don't want to end with certain parts of the quest being skipped because the game put you in a group that already did that part. So yeah, it happened to me in the past. If you don't want to have these happening to you, then pretty much play it solo and put it on like normal or easy difficulty. At number 12, if you happen to share your account with your family member or simply want to pick a different gender for your character, then the game lets you create a second or even a third pilot, which shares all of the unlockables, the currencies, the cosmetics, and challenge progressions with your main character. You can do so from the start screen by pressing the new pilot button on the right corner, but keep this in mind, you won't get the weapons, neither the gear pieces you have on your main pilot. You will also pretty much have to go through the entire leveling process once more if you do that, but at the very least you have the option to create a second pilot. At number 13, if you're the type of person who enjoys talking with NPCs, then you should probably know the fact that they do reward you depending on your dialogue choices, and this mostly comes in the form of rewarding you standing with the 3 factions in the game. This is all contextual and depends on the character as well as your choices. There's no real guide out there, but what you can do is pay attention to the character, to the story, to the lore itself, and more often than not you're going to pick the right option. At number 14, and especially if you already reached level 30, while you can go to each individual faction location in the fort to get your contracts, it's much faster and easier to do it in the launch bay. Unlike the contract boards in the fort, the one inside the bay holds all of the contracts available from all of the factions, including the legendary ones, and it also has the added advantage of showing you if you have any available to begin with. It even displays a message saying this. At number 15, while it sounds intuitive enough, I've seen many newcomers having problem with with this, especially doing free play where finishing an event doesn't throw you back at the fort. Basically, you can finish an expedition simply by going into the map menu and holding down the action button, which for the PC version is of course letter F on the keyboard. Additionally, at number 16, in case you get stuck in a wall or something behind the wall, or if you want to get back into the star area, what you can do is go again into the map menu and this time around press and hold Y or the equivalent on the controller to unstuck yourself. At number 17, while this is a small one, most of you probably skipped the fact that your pre-orders as well as the demo weekends came in with bonus banners you can apply on your pilot's profile. You can check these in the expedition screen menu in the second section that deals with your party. Here you can press and hold modify banner and you can pick from a wide selection of very cool banners, and this will even show in the alliance system for the people you play with. At number 18, during certain strongholds you can skip fighting with some of the enemies if your time is limited or if you're trying to farm it as fast as possible, which is mostly done of course after reaching level 30. In the Tire Mine, for example, the tunnels leading to the big areas, there are certain scorpions in there which you can fight, but you can totally skip these ones and not even pay attention to them. They barely drop any loot anyway. Simply follow the objective markers to the areas they point you towards, and here is where you'll need to do all the fighting. You don't need to do it in the tunnels and in the filler areas. At number 19, you can unlock blueprints for certain types of weapons by simply completing challenges using them. You can check the requirements each weapon has in the challenges tab, but it mostly boils down to killing a couple dozen regular enemies for the uncommon blueprint, several dozen epic enemies for the rare one, and finally about 10 to 20 legendary ones for the epic blueprint. To unlock the masterwork versions though, for most weapons you will need to get either a legendary or masterwork version to drop first and then use it to kill enemies, which will later on unlock the masterwork version of that blueprint, so you can craft it again and again and again until you get the best that's possible. Finally, at number 20, take a look at the type of component you equip on your javelin. These components are essentially the trinkets of this game, but some of them are javelin specific while the others are universal. For 99% of the cases, I recommend strictly using javelin specific components as they provide much stronger bonuses for your classes. Don't even waste time with the universal ones unless you have nothing else to put in your newest slot or the bonuses on them are very good. For example, for the Colossus specific components, these provide massive HP increase compared to the universal ones that are pretty mediocre. But that is all there is to it today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, of course, a thumbs up would be super appreciated. Also make sure to hit that subscribe button and I'll see you guys next time.